Easily one of the most popular bolt-action rifles is the Winchester Model 70, and most people know there was a pre-64 model, so obviously made before 1964, then a post-64 model, that's self-explanatory, and then a reintroduced pre-64, which they call it some people call it the classic, or the pre-64 Part 2. So the question is, which one of them is the best? And I must have received, I don't know, countless letters and emails and so on about exactly that, and I was never in a position to show you the three in detail, partly because I was missing one rifle and partly a function of time. Anyway, we're going to look at the three and decide which one is actually the best, and between now and then we'll cover a lot of stuff. I hope I don't confuse you and confuse myself. I also want to mention that I'm receiving a lot of more mail than ever now, and if you have pictures or you want to identify a firearm or get an idea roughly what the value of something is or what something is that came out of an attic or what have you, it's easiest for me if you go to Patreon, and the links for that are in the description. It should be fairly easy to do that, and I can help you much more quickly just because the main channel gets so much mail. And aside from all that, Patreon is the best way to help my channel. But getting back to the Model 70, I don't want to bore you with dates and so forth, but everybody knows the Model 70 was, pre-64 was probably the best bolt-action rifle of its time. But manufacturing was complex. It was kind of based on the Mauser and the Springfield, and there are other channels that go into great detail on those designs. But I thought I'll show you the sporting rifles, because what we try to do here is talk about rifles that you can go and buy and which one to use. And I noticed a lot of you are writing me that you're not heading out with a Ruger American this year or some other Savage Access or what have you, that you're heading out with classic rifles, which is kind of a neat trend, and I understand that. The vintage rifles in most cases are a lot better than the new rifles, and I guess there's a lot of demand for the vintage rifles as a result. Anyway, I'm not sure where to start, but may as well start with the pre-64. So this is the action. You've all seen this before, and this one is what is it? It's a 243 featherweight. For those of you not familiar with actions, I mean, the things you look for are what does the action do for recoil. So here's the recoil lug. It's integral with the receiver, and the whole action reminds you of either a Mauser or a Springfield, or like a combination of the two, which is what it is. But our objective is to figure out which one is the best one. And one of the main features of the pre-64 is what's called a cone breach. Now, we tested this before filming, and as you know, we don't have very good cameras or sound equipment, so we can't film in here to show you an important part of the pre-64 action, which is actually the barrel and how the barrel interacts with the receiver. So I had good fortune a while ago. Pardon the clunking. There's no solution to this. If we put a cover on it, then there are other deficiencies. So if you hear the sound of metal on whatever this table is made of, we just can't get around it for now. Anyway, we had the good fortune of buying this brand new pre-64 Model 70 barrel. This would be a standard grade. So the one I just showed you is a featherweight, and this is going to be a tough video for the camera people. But the standard rifle has this island milled into the barrel. I mean, it's turned on a lathe, and then it has this is for attaching the barrel through the forend. Now, do I have that stock? I actually do. I'll have to make sure I don't lose my train of thought. This is the standard grade stock of a pre-64 Model 70 barrel. And you can see there was a screw that was supposed to go through there to secure the barrel. Now, that would be right here. So everybody wants free-floated barrels, so they don't do that anymore. But without losing our train of thought, here's the coned breech. So effectively, what Winchester did not want to have happen is if this were flat steel and a round is being fed from the magazine, if this were flat, there's a possibility that it would jam. So they made it like a funnel. You can see a coned effect, and the round slips in. This is where the claw extractor fits, and we'll get into that in a minute. But as you can see, the head of the cartridge case is unsupported, and I'll show you in a moment how the bolt interacts with this barrel. But that's a plus and a minus. So they feed beautifully because the bullet can't jam on here. As the Mauser is flat. I looked at a whole bunch of actions before filming. I was going to put them on the table, but we have so many parts on the table already. So that's the pre-64 barrel, and here's the bolt. If we can focus on the locking lugs, you can see that the cartridge is captured by the claw extractor. So this is the controlled round feed that everybody talks about. That would be a Mauser feature that extended to other rifles, and the pre-64 Model 70 has control round feed, and the post-64 Model 70 does not. And since the post-64 Model 70 does not have a cone breech, they can make the locking lugs flat here. So you can see these are rounded because it has to fit into this cone. I'll set it down there again. And the Post 64 doesn't. They did some interesting things on here, and we may as well just stay focused on the Post 64 bolt face, because here's the bolt face of a Remington 722. Now the 700, the 721, the 725, they all look the same. So you can see there's no claw extractor. You can't have a cartridge in the bolt face in the 700 or in any push feed. The cartridge simply is lifted from the magazine or the follower and pushed into the chamber. The bolt can't hold the cartridge. So people make a lot of that because this has a tremendous purchase on the rim. It's very hard for this case, when it's fired or even when it's not fired, to escape from the bolt. Whereas if things go wrong in here, if you get some rust or what have you, it's possible, and I've seen it where the case is actually stuck in the rifle. This is a big problem, especially if you're after dangerous game. So I show you the 722 for another reason, and I have the action, and we'll bounce around a bit, but this all makes sense. Here's the 722 Remington action, and this is what caused Winchester to introduce the Post 64 Model 70. So as you can see, the recoil lug is not part of the receiver. It's clamped between the barrel threading and the front receiver ring. This is a piece of tubular steel. Of course, millions of these Model 700s. This is a 722. Actually, this is in 257 Roberts, one of my favorite calibers, and very hard for me to find anyway, but I was lucky and found it in the 722. It's a very simple receiver. I can't really tell you about the trigger. I've never had a problem with this trigger. I guess some Model 700s did have problems. Compared to the Model 70 trigger, to me the 722 and 700 are far more complex, and I always try to stay away from complexity. Anyway, Winchester really must have wondered after they introduced the Post 64, so I hope you've had a good look at the 722 or 700 here, and this is the short action. They must have really wondered when they introduced this beautiful action. The Post 64 is still a proper action. It's got a recoil lug. The bolt, as you've seen, the face of the bolt is quite a bit like the Remington. The trigger is very similar to the pre-64. And what I'll do is just lay the two here. So here's the Post 64 and here's the pre-64. And you can see if I didn't tell you what's what with these, they look very, very similar. This is, I think, a casting or some other manufacturing method. But these are remarkably similar actions. By the way, this shoulder here on the barrel, for those of you just starting to collect, if you see the shoulder on the barrel, that means it's a featherweight. This is a standard post 64 in 308. The sights on the post 64 were always excellent. Actually, the post 64 is just altogether an excellent rifle, and I'll toss this Remington in front of you. So this came out because of this, arguably, and this to me is a lot more of a rifle than the 722. I have this in 300 Savage and 222. I think I have a deluxe model. They're all very accurate and they were very inexpensive, but I don't think there's a comparison in terms of not the form, not the function. That seems to be the trend. The function can be accomplished by a polymer stock, eventually a polymer receiver, but the form of rifles I think is important to hunters and collectors, and this is definitely a superior form, which is not based on utility, it's based on other things. Anyway, so there you have a good idea of the three actions, and I'll now take this one away and we'll substitute the classic action, and you can see that they've made the trigger, in my opinion, more complex. The receiver is surprisingly loyal to the original design. We've got some scallop shapes here that I notice that are almost identical with the post 64, but the new classic version has control round feet. So for that, I'll put these two bolts. This is the post 64 bolt, and this is the Model 70 that you can buy still now. I don't know how long they're going to be able to make these exceptional rifles. That's what came out of this, how excellent the pre-64 Model 70 was and how excellent the current classic version is. And you still have control round feet. Now these are not high volume fire bolt actions. You don't have removable magazines. That's not the point. But in terms of sheer quality, this is an unbelievable rifle. This one is in 325 WSM. People make fun of that round and say it's useless and things like that. I'm not so sure. Anyway, the other parts are more or less routine, but I may as well go through them. So this is a magazine box of the pre-64. Here's the magazine box of the classic, and here's the magazine box of the post-64. And the post-64 has a steel floor plate, follower, trigger guard. I checked with a magnet. That's steel, that's aluminum. 3 screws for the post-64. And this is the pre-64. This is steel. Everything else self-explanatory. This is the featherweight, so that's aluminum. And here's the classic magazine box. 1-piece floor plate and 2 screws. And the bolts we looked at. The floor plate is steel, the rest is aluminum on here, as you'd expect. And here's the stock that you get on a featherweight model. Interestingly, because it's a 325 WSM, the barrel is actually, it has a standard barrel contour. It doesn't have the stepped barrel. This is the barrel of the 325. You can see there's no step in here. And that 325, I guess they may end up being phased out, but what an accurate cartridge. Just excellent. I always liked the 8x68S, and so I guess the 325 appealed to me. And in fairness, I'll show you the original stock for that featherweight. You can see Bubba got a hold of this and did some imaginary things with the stock, but it's still serviceable. It's fine. In fact, that's what I use. And so with that rifle, it's a 243. You won't believe this, but it's a 243 Super Pooper, which sounds really ridiculous, but you can shoot 243 standard ammo, so I do that. And I'll set that aside. And then here's the beautiful stock of a Post 64. People were, it's a moth. People were really alarmed with the first versions of the Post 64. There was a lot of space between the barrel and the barrel channel, and I don't know, when the Post 64 came out, there was sort of just great hue and cry about this bad rifle. I just can't see it. I think the Post 64 Model 70 is an excellent rifle, and they did their best to improve the stock. Some of the XTR models from the 80s, just beautiful sporters. Magnificent rifles. I've never had one that didn't shoot, and of course I like the ones with the iron sights, but there's so many different models I lose track of it actually. Did I show you I think I did. This is the stock of the pre-64 standard grade. So a more modest stock, but again, I think that's part of the appeal. They call the Model 70 the rifleman's rifle, and it probably is so beautifully done. Now we'll go to the hardest part of the video, which is this feeding, or the way the bolt interacts with the barrel. So I'll do my best. It was just an idea I had because I can tell from a lot of the people that write me, there's a lot of confusion out there about how a bolt works. So this is the pre-64 bolt, and you feed it in. Now you can see the claw extractor fits into the cut there, and everything's fully controlled. And then you turn the bolt to lock. You wouldn't see this because this would be inside the receiver ring. And I'm going to turn this all the way around, if we can focus on this section, and you'll see this cut right there, and that is where the blade ejector, which is integral with the receiver, I don't think it's a separate part, but it's in the receiver, that hits the case when you pull the bolt back, and then the empty casing or the loaded casing cartridge is thrown out. I hope that is understandable, and if I'm not saying the right words, at least you can see it working in the gun. And then because of this claw, like the Mauser 98, there are no mistakes. That is always going to come out. And to my way of thinking, reliability is probably more important than anything. In a way, even more important than accuracy, because I guess you can always shoot again, but it has to work. And I've never had any issues with these Model 70s. So now reaching a conclusion, and I probably forgot things or made mistakes, please write me and I'll try to fill in the gaps. I like this classic Model 70. I think that one should buy them before they stop making them. Essentially, you're getting a Mauser 98, but with Model 70 improvements. You're never going to lose money, especially if they discontinue them. I don't know what to say about triggers, because you know I'm not a student of triggers, and I'm not a student of target accuracy. I'm essentially a hunter and a collector, and then casual target shooting. So I cover a broad range of firearms, maybe a little differently from other people, but this is the magic, the control round feed, and I don't think it should be underestimated. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Post 64, and I really don't know. Maybe there was some people writing about the Post 64 and how bad it was. It isn't bad at all, but these are magnificent. And aside from everything else, I noticed that quite a few of the pre-64s I'm buying, they may need a new barrel. They're not youngsters anymore. So I was happy to get a 325 WSM, which is the only one I have right now. I've owned others. I had a 243, and they make them in all kinds of different models. Anyway, I hope I did the subject justice. It's a lot to cover and absorb, but you can see these Model 70s are first-class rifles, and they're not priced, that much more than rifles that are a lot less than, in terms of quality and design, a lot less than the Model 70. So yeah, it looks fantastic to me. Again, if I forgot something, please remind me. And I guess that's about it. So yeah, please, I reiterate, sign up on Patreon for quicker access to me. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care out there.